Okay, I know this looks like the setup for something incredibly kinky, but just bear with me for a second. I'm testing a hypothesis, that's what science is, on how you get a devil fruit ability into an object. This might look like an ordinary banana, but this is actually the very elusive zone-type fruit Bato no Mi. It has the power to turn something into a bat. So I'm going to use this on my baseball bat to make a baseball bat. I don't really know what applications that could really serve, but it has alliteration, and that's all I really care about, alright? Now, begin test. Shit. Okay, that plan didn't really go exactly as I figured, but it brings up an interesting question. How exactly do you get an inanimate object in the One Piece world to eat a devil fruit? Because if you notice something, whenever you see an object having the power of a devil fruit, and it doesn't happen too often in the story, I think there's a few instances in filler where there was like that pen that ate the mythical zone model Tanuki, and I think there was an alpaca fruit in one of the movies, but in the canon of the story, we've only seen this happening 3 times, where an object consumed a devil fruit. Every time this happens, they always use the term that the object ate it, like it's a gun or a cannon that ate the dog fruit model Dashound. It was a sword that ate the Zozo fruit, you know, Funkfried, Spondum sword, okay? Now, obviously, they don't mean, like, the sword, you know, developed a mouth and consumed the fruit. That's just ridiculous. In a world that already includes, you know, pirates that are able to knock, you know, thousands of people out just by their willpower, in a world where islands float on the sky, the concept of a mouth just appearing on an inanimate object and eating a fruit, that's just going a little bit too far. So, when they say that the objects ate the fruit, I think what that basically is saying that they themselves don't really understand how this works. I think really only Vegapunk and Caesar Clown and, you know, the scientists that have really been working with devil fruits and have the necessary resources to study these kind of things, they're the ones that understand it. The people that even might have a devil fruit that was eaten by an object don't really understand the process. It might be something as simple as just like, hey, here's my sword, and then Vegapunk takes it and then gives it back to you later, and by the way, it has the power of an elephant in it now, be careful, make sure you feed it 3 times a day, or however often an elephant needs to eat. I don't really know. You know, it might be a situation like that, like Sponda might not really know the process. In fact, every time the process has been brought up, it's always just been kind of, like, played off. Like, I think someone asked Spondum, like, a sword becoming an elephant? How the hell does that work? And I think Spondum is just like, oh yeah, it's a long story. So maybe they even understand the general concept, but it would just take too long to explain in those circumstances. Also, the reason I'm doing this now is because of the last chapter with the introduction of that new giant in the cover page, the cook of the new Giant Warrior Pirates, Goldberg. He has that shield. That shield freaking bugs me. You know, it's probably going to be turned out to just be a normal shield. Like, nothing really that special. It's not a homie. It's not a devil fruit. It's just a shield with a face painted on it. But that shield really bugs me. So, I said I was going to do a video about the whole shield. I'm not going to do something that ridiculous. Although, if anybody could make a 20-minute video about just a single picture, that would probably be me. But, no, I'm just gonna make a video just in general about objects consuming devil fruits. But, yeah, that shield, man, I don't know. Now, something interesting to bring up, though, out of the 3 canon examples that we've had in the story of an object consuming a devil fruit, for one thing, they've all been zone devil fruits, and we're going to get back to that on why I think that they all are zones, and it's not necessarily that only a zone could be fed to an object, it's rather that's like the best situation that you would want. Like maybe you could feed a Paramecia or a Logia to an object, but there's reasons why you would not want to, so we'll get back to that. But out of the 3 animals that we have that are zones, that are consumed by objects, we had Lassu the Dashound, we had Funkfried the Elephant Sword, and then we also had Smiley, who was Caesar's Clown's invention on Punk Hazard. He gathered together all of the gas that was left over from that big devastating explosion on Punk Hazard. I think it was called like H2S gas or something. Caesar Clown returned to the island, gathered together all of the gas from his bomb, and then fed it to the Saru Saru no Mi model. I always want to say this word is axtol, but I think it's axolotl or oxalotl, whichever, however you want to pronounce that. Gave it that fruit, and then it became Smiley, his pet slime creature. Okay, so out of those three, though, the one that's odd is Lasso, because Funkfried was owned by Spondum, who is a member of CP9, the leader of CP9. He works for the world government. Vegapunk is part of the world government, their science and research division, so it's like, okay, maybe Spondum, gave him the sword, and then that's how he got Funkfried. Likewise, Caesar Clown makes sense for creating Smiley. Caesar Clown is a scientist that worked with Vegapunk, and Vegapunk even tried his hand in, creating artificial devil fruits, and he's the one that figured out the process of feeding devil fruits to objects, so Caesar either came up with that conclusion on his own, or he just stole Vegapunk's notes, whichever you want to say that as well, and that's how he was able to create Smiley. Caesar's a scientist, makes sense. What about Lasso, though? Lasso was owned by Mr. Four and Mrs. Merry Christmas, who were members of Baroque Works that seemingly had no connections to the world government whatsoever. And it seems commonplace in the world government, like how this process is done, or at least they're not surprised by it. But to the rest of the world, it doesn't seem to be very common. We don't see, objects with zone powers walking around everywhere. Like I said, there's only 3 canon examples of this. The best excuse I can come up with that is maybe, the Baroque Works attacked a marine vessel or a world government vessel at one point, and Lasso was on board, and they took him off, and, Lasso warmed up to Mr. Four and Mrs. Merry Christmas, and they just like, oh, okay, we have a dog gun now. Awesome, let's load him up with baseballs and use them for our, Block 4 ability. Okay, fine, sure. Because it does seem odd that the other two, Funkfried and Smiley, were created by people with ties to the world government, and then you have Lasso as kind of an outlier there. Not really sure. I'm also pretty sure that Mr. Four and Mrs. Merry Christmas, they're not like scientific dynamos here, and they don't have really any connections with the world government, so I don't really understand that. They wouldn't understand how the process is done. Maybe that just like, oh yeah, objects eating devil fruits. I've heard about this. That's what happened. Oh well, whatever. He's a good puppy. They don't probably know, and it's probably really just for Oda to introduce that concept early on. Like Oda had the idea, maybe objects can eat devil fruits too, and you put a devil fruit ability into an object. It could be any object. It could be a gun. It could be a gas. Which isn't even really something that's tangible. You can't really grab it. It's one thing to like, okay, here's a pair of scissors. Here's a devil fruit. At least it's an object. Gas is just something entirely different state of matter there. The sword makes sense anyway. So, how do I think this actually occurs? Well, from the way that Oda's going about this, and the way that he seems to be setting up devil fruits ever since the time skip, is he's sort of demystifying them in the sense that we originally figured devil fruits were just straight up magic. Here's a magic fruit, you eat it, and you could turn into a mud person. That's just how it works, And it seems like Vegapunk, being a scientist, though, would have studied this, in depth for a very long time to exactly figure out what they are. And to probably most people in the One Piece world, devil fruits are seen as just magical things that have been around forever. I mentioned this in my last video regarding the Void Century, but I think devil fruits arose during that time period. They haven't been around for like millions of years or anything like that. They were only around since the Void Century, but that was long enough ago that people, just assume that they, part of myth, part of legend. There's some parts of the world where devil fruits aren't even common at all. Mostly we see them all the time on the Grand Line in the New World, but in the Four Seas, they're more of an urban legend kind of deal. Not a lot of people get to see them, really. We had Luffy with the Gamu Gamu no Mi, then of course we saw Buggy with the Bara Bara. After that, all of the main enemies that Luffy fought in the East Blue didn't have the ability of a devil fruit. Arlong, Krieg, Kuro, they didn't have any of these abilities. Django didn't have anything like that. He used hypnotism, so yeah, kind of rare in the Four Seas. But in the Grand Line, they're everywhere. Vegapunk began to study them, and I think what it comes down to is the essence inside of the fruit. The fruits and the humans that consume them, and in this case the objects that consume them as well, are nothing more than just a vessel. But this brings up a bunch of interesting questions, like what would happen if you took a devil fruit and you destroyed it. Like, you took a devil fruit and just threw it into, like, a furnace, and it just burned away the fruit. What would happen there? Well, I would assume the essence, the power of that fruit would leave that particular fruit and then go into another one. Or would it go into the nearest object, or into the nearest human? That's kind of interesting, you know? I think this concept of the essence or the soul of a devil fruit really came into being really obviously whenever Big Mom consumed Mother Caramel. Mother Caramel had the soul no mi. Big Mom nom nom nommed on her mom before you know, she really even knew what was going on when she was eating her birthday cake. She consumed Mother Caramel and all the other kids from the orphanage. We can, at least, I mean, it wasn't directly shown, but it was very heavily implied. Next thing you know, Big Mom has the power of the soul fruit, so we can assume, you know, Mother Caramel had the essence in her, Big Mom ate her, essence left Mother Caramel's body, but it didn't have to travel very far to find another, you know, host, another fruit, because Big Mom was, you know, surrounding her, so the fruit's essence just stayed in her. That's the way that goes down there. Perhaps you could make a facility, like a specific, like, enclosed space, where you have an object and a devil fruit, and then Vegapunk destroys the fruit, and with no host, the essence has to go into the nearest objects, which in Lassu's case would have been a cannon, in Funk Freed's case it would have been a sword. Which also, by the way, I must mention that when we see Spondum as a child, we also see a pet elephant that he had back in the day. Now, that's not confirmed to be Funkfried. That might just be another elephant that Spondum might have just really liked elephants, okay? Or it could have been Funkfried. I mean, and Vegapunk seems to be like an old guy, from what we've heard around the grapevine. You know, people call him like an old man or whatever, so maybe Funkfried is pretty old, who knows? I think elephants live a pretty long time. So, yeah, it could have been the same elephant, might not have been, but it doesn't really matter in this instance. And then in the case with Caesar, that was actually kind of explained what he did. He took the gas from the H2S or whatever, you know, took it together, solidified it, maybe made a containment unit for all the gas to stay in, threw a devil fruit in there, and then destroyed the devil fruit, and then it went into the gas itself. Maybe there has to be a very particular containment unit for this to actually occur, you know, for the devil fruit to have no other option. I mean, like, the essence has to go somewhere. The essence cannot just exist by itself, you know, like a soul leaving the body, I guess. It can't, you know, live without that. I mean, maybe if it spends too much time on its own, it'll be destroyed, and that devil fruit will no longer exist, period. It has to find something to go into. Maybe there's priorities for this. Maybe it's like the first priority is going to be a fruit or another living being, but if there's none of those around, then it has to find another host in the, like, just any object, like pair of scissors, baseball bat, sword, whichever it can find, you know? Now, why is it always zones? That's the question, you know. How come Paramecia are never thrown in there? With Logia, you can kind of explain that, because Logia are like a really rare fruit. If you end up getting a Logia, that's a good day for you. Like, holy shit, we found the freaking Pika Pika no Mi, or the Yuki Yuki no Mi. I could turn into a snowman, you know. So it's like, I'm not gonna waste that by throwing it at a pen. You know, like, you want to consume that ability for yourself, because Logias are so rare. But what about Paramecia? Paramecia, you got a bunch of different abilities, and they're the most common. So, how come we don't see any Paramecia objects going around, okay? Well, I don't think it's the issue that you couldn't do that, because why would that be different? Why would the process only work for Zones and not Paramecia and Logia? Unless later down the line we find out that Vegapunk has done extensive research into devil fruits, and it's like, yeah, they might look like they're all the same basic concept, like eat a fruit, gain a power, but there are very distinct differences between Zone, Paramecia, and Logia, just beyond the powers they grant. Like, there's some basic differences with the types of fruit they are or whatever. I don't know, maybe. But the point is, that we only get to see Zones. So, I think the reason is, if you just gave Paramecia abilities into objects, obviously they would not have sentience or a will of their own, because they're not animals. If you took, I don't know, if you took Baby Five's Buki Buki no Mi, and you threw it into a smartphone, and boom, you have a magical transforming smartphone that can turn into any weapon anytime you want. Now, the problem with that sounds badass, I know, but the problem with that is that anybody could just pick up the phone and turn it into a bazooka, or a gun, or a giant axe or something, you know? Anybody could use it. The problem is just that. your enemies could use it as well. So let's say, more practical, let's say you take a Logia. Let's just use the Pika Pika no Mi because that one's awesome. You take that and you throw it into a sword. Now you have a magical light sword. You could swing it and light waves come out. You could shoot lasers from the tip. Pew, pew, pew. Okay, you have a light sword now. And you give it to one of the members of the Marines, one of the high rank, like a vice admiral like Momonga. Like, here, Momonga, you have a freaking lightsaber now. Like, damn straight. I love Momonga. I can't wait till Momonga actually fights against... I want to see a Momonga versus Zoro fight, like, so hard. Like, you don't even know. But anyway, Momonga has a light sword now, alright? So he's going around the Grand Line, wasting fools. What happens if someone gets a hold of that thing? What happens if someone takes out Momonga? What happens if there's an enemy attack by a Yonko or something and he gets defeated and someone picks up his magical light sword with the Pika Pika no Mi in it? They could use it too. The benefit with Zoans is that if they turn into animals, animals can be tamed. I mean, depends on the animal, really, but a dog can be tamed and domesticated, really, a dog. The same thing with an elephant. Elephants have been used in human culture before. We've had war elephants at one point. And I know there's a difference between taming and domestication. I'm a fan of CGP Gray's videos. If you haven't noticed, go check those out on domestication, really. In terms of the oxalotl, the salamander thing that Smiley was... You know, people have pet geckos and salamanders and other cold blood. I mean, I'm sure you could tame, you know, something like that, sure. You know, it might be a little bit more difficult. I mean, I guess if you had like a bear zone, you know, or something of that nature, maybe you could. Depends on the person that... I mean, look at Luffy. Luffy was able to use his haki to, you know, freaking tame all those animals on Ruskina, so I guess it really just depends on the user. But animals could have a connection with the user. So, like, Funkfried being used by Spondum, they have a connection. If Funkfried was that elephant that Spondum had ever since he was a little kid, they've probably been through thick and thin together. So, you know, not just anybody that picks up Funkfried's gonna be able to use the sword other than Spondum. Probably the same thing with Lassu. Lassu's not going to take orders from anybody except Mr. Four and Mrs. Merry Christmas. Now, there can also be a major drawback to this as well, because, yeah, while animals can be tamed by a particular person and only listen to their master, they can also feel pain. And they can feel fear, and they have emotions and things like that. Kind of messed up when you think about it. You take an inanimate object like a sword and give it the capacity to feel pain. Like, oh, what? It didn't ask for that. But, yeah, like Frankie was able to scare the shit out of Funkfried, pointing a cannon right at the poor thing's face and be like, you better back down. And it backed down. So there are drawbacks, but I think it's way more beneficial to have them just be zone abilities. And also... I mean, zone abilities can be powerful, mythical zones especially, but we've never seen a mythical zone be put into an object. We saw the pen that was a Tenuki, but that was in one of the video games. In the context of the story, we've never seen a mythical zone being thrown into an object. So mythical zones are strong, and there's other zones that are strong, but in terms of just like a wacky, crazy ability that can be really overpowered, I don't think it's going to come from the zone abilities that much. Just regular zones. I mean, yeah, ancient zone, mythical zone, that's a completely different category. But, you know, an elephant sword is not really going to be the big, you know, tide changing in the battle. You know, same thing with a gun dog or a giant. Okay, yeah, the giant... Smiley gas, you know, salamander. That was pretty crazy, but that's something unique that Caesar came up with, you know. Not everybody's gonna have that. What I'm talking about is the light sword thing. If an enemy had that, it could be very dangerous. The same thing with combining a paramecia, like the magical transforming smartphone that can become any weapon. You know, like having things like that coming into enemies' hands and anybody could just pick up and use, that would be very detrimental. You wouldn't want to have that. So keep it to zones, really. And maybe Vegapunk even has a policy to that. Like, I am not going to try... Maybe he tried it once, maybe there's some prototypes or whatever, but I'm not going to be mass-producing, you know, all these crazy, wacky weapons. Or maybe they're keeping them secure in a vault somewhere, like, to make sure they don't get out there into the world in some way. Yeah. Now, something else I'm kind of wondering, because I mentioned the whole thing about a devil fruit having to be destroyed, like cracked open, in order for the essence to leave and then enter into an object. There are some problems with that. Like, for instance, whenever they presented the, I think it was the not the Ame no Mi. Yeah, was it the Ame no Mi? The soap fruit to Khalifa at Eni's lobby. You could see her cutting it up with a fork and a knife. She didn't just eat it whole. She, you know, actually cut it up and ate it. you know, and so when she cut it, nothing happened. The essence didn't come out. However, it has been stated that the second you take one bite into the devil fruit, the rest of the fruit becomes inert. It just becomes like an ordinary disgusting fruit. So all that Kaku had to do is peel his banana, take one bite, and now he has the ability of a giraffe. However, Khalifa cut it open, so that's kind of a problem there. There's probably a unique process to how this is. Maybe the whole fruit has to be completely destroyed. You know, like, even when it's cut up for a time, you know, the essence is still in there, but if it's completely destroyed, like atomized by an explosion or by like an intense flame or something, you know, that's when the soul of this fruit actually leaves and has to go into another host. This is also a theory that gets brought up to how Blackbeard can have more than one devil fruit abilities, and I'm not really a fan of the theory, but it goes that, you know, Blackbeard has the rings on his fingers, right? Well, yeah, he consumed the Yami Yami no Mi, and he put the Paramecia Gura Gura no Mi from Whitebeard not in his body, but in one of his rings, because when he makes the Quake Bubble, it has a ring on his fingers. So people think that's how Blackbeard can consume the devil fruits, and I don't think that's the case, because for one thing, even though this isn't a concept that's all over the world and everybody knows about it, it's a concept that's already been introduced. I think people would maybe recognize what Blackbeard is doing here if the Gura Gura no Mi was just on his ring. And also think about it, the same issue, like, yeah, it's in his ring. That's a lot more dangerous for Blackbeard, because if he ever takes off that ring, if he ever loses that ring, all someone has to do is just cut off his hand, or, well, I mean, it's difficult. Well, no, you could cut off Blackbeard's hand, because he's a Logia, but attacks don't pass through him, so he might be possible for you to do that. All you gotta do is lop off his hand, take the ring, and you have the powers of the Gura Gura no Mi. So, I think when it comes to Blackbeard, that's an entirely different subject. That's something else that Oda's gonna come up with on how Blackbeard could actually, you know, consume more than one devil fruits. I don't think it's gonna be something as simple as just, oh, it was in his ring all along. But the theory is out there. People have considered the concept of putting Paramecia or Logia, other abilities other than zone abilities, into objects, so it's out there in the zeitgeist. And, you know, it's even possible we still might see an object have a Paramecia or Logia ability in the future. We just haven't seen them yet, or, you know, they're being safeguarded by Vegapunk or the world government making sure they don't get out there, but they could still exist, very much so. But anyway, thanks for watching, everybody. Leave your comments below on what you think about this whole mess. Like, how does Vegapunk actually do this? You know, he has his lab, devil fruit, sword. How do you 2 + 2 = fish? How does he make this work? You know what I mean? So, yeah, leave comments below and all that stuff. And now I have something special for you at the end of this video before I sign off. I'm going to take my fez off for this. Okay, serious Tekking. Okay, who here is a fan of Bleach? You know, I am. I talked about it for about 5 years. You know, I know my Bleach. You might know that the anime kind of stopped short. We didn't get the final arc of Bleach, but a friend of mine on YouTube, Retro Rhino, also known as Ryan, he's animating the final arc, and he has a team working for him, you know, voice cast and all that stuff, and they're coming along nicely, and he sent me some promos for me to show to you good people. So I have some links in the description below for you to go check out Ryan's channel and support him if you like Bleach and you want to see the final arc animated, because I know that's something we all like to see. You know, he's a small team right now. I mean, he's not going to be like the entire thing's going to come out. There's no release schedule or anything like that, but he's coming out with something soon on the 27th, he told me, so look forward to that. But here's some promotional video from Retro Rhino's 1,000-Year Blood War arc for you to get excited about. I know! That was epic, right? Anyway, thanks for watching, everybody. Like I said, check out the links below to Ryan's channel. Leave your comments below on what you think about objects consuming devil fruits. This will be Tekking101, signing out. Later, everybody! What the fuck? What the fuck is wrong with me? I wasted a perfectly good banana. Oh, I got goop all over my...